Hello and welcome to the Failing Writers podcast, sponsored by the lovely and, let's be honest, very forgiving people at Scrivener. If you're new here, The Failing Writers is a podcast about the long, difficult, but ultimately beautiful journey towards some kind of writing success, however modest that may be. Because if we keep telling ourselves it's all about the journey, then we can't ever really fail, can we? See? Quite clever that, isn't it?
I cannot believe, knowing that we're not shy to blow our own trumpets, that we have not once mentioned the fact that the Failing Writers podcast has been nominated for some independent podcast awards.
That's because we're humble, though, isn't it? That's why.
Yeah, that'll be why.
We don't need to go around telling people that we're the most nominated in this year's Independent Podcast Awards
in four categories.
Four
no
categories.
Less. We don't need to tell them
why do we need
no,
to?
You're right.
No,
we'll just leave it out the podcast. We'll just omit to tell people. Yeah.
By the time this episode comes out, we will have been to the awards and will have miserably failed
anything.
in all four of those categories. I think that's why we're not saying anything, really.
That's probably true. Yeah. In the next episode, you will be able to infer quite easily whether we won or not.
Yeah.
Because we'll either want to mention it constantly in a really annoying way, or we'll just quietly kind of sweep it under the carpet and never mention it
But
again.
hey, good luck to us. Well done, well deserved.
Hey, you've got to take these little wins, because they don't come around very often, let's be honest.
Not for the likes of us. No, they don't.
Exactly. But anyway...
Enough about us.
Enough about us. We should do a very quick mention of the competition, shouldn't we? Because there's a little bit of time left.
There's loads of time left. What do you mean a little bit? There's got like 4 days. If you listen to this when it comes out, you've got like 4 or 5 days to get it done.
Yeah.
That's loads of time. There'll be people that are going to leave it until like Thursday. The people that be leaving it till Friday morning.
You're right.
Proper deadline surfers against it. That's when they'll do the best work.
It's true. And it is possible, isn't it? It's only 300 words.
If you happen to type the right 300 words first time, just by chance, monkeys and typewriters,
you could win £500. It's totally worth having a pop.
So that's this Friday midday, isn't it? That's the cut-off. That's when you need to get it sent in.
It is. Yeah, it's Friday the 24th of October. If you've missed it, if you're listening to this later,
that's sad, isn't it?
Unlucky.
Yeah.
You've missed it already.
But all the details are on our website, failingwriterspodcast.com.
So have a look at that.
So we've bigged ourselves up. We've pushed our competition. I think it's about time to give someone else the limelight, isn't it?
I think we probably need to thank Scrivener.
We should thank Scrivener. We should.
Because not only have they sponsored the competition, they're also sponsoring this entire series of the podcast. So a massive, massive thank you to them.
Yeah. All the usual stuff. Check out literatureandlatte.com. That's all the information for Scrivener on there, and you can download it, do a free trial, and get 20% off by using the code FAILING.
You're welcome. Now, I'd like to know what's happening in this episode of the podcast, Tom, because it's quite exciting, isn't it?
Previously, you wouldn't have been excited because you knew nothing about them.
Absolutely nothing. But I'm very glad that I do now, Tom.
It is a good find, isn't it? And
it is.
If any of you out there do like surfing around YouTube and finding some of the good stuff on there, you will be aware of the Map Men.
Or Map Men.
Pardon?
Or just Map Men.
The Map. Oh, yeah, no, we do discuss that briefly. They do some fantastic sort of comedy documentaries about maps and everything to do with maps and stories surrounding maps. And sometimes, as we discover in the conversation with them, just using maps as an excuse to tell you some history that they want to tell you and then loosely attach a map to it at the end.
Yeah.
But they are fun, funny and informative. And we thought, they sound like kindred spirits. And fortunately, they've got a book coming out, so that means it's legitimate to get them on the podcast so I can have a chat with them.
Absolutely. But yeah, it is. It's very entertaining, but it's also very interesting on adaptation, like how to move something from YouTube to book form, and also about collaboration as well, how you get the best out of each other. So we were particularly interested in that.
Definitely, yeah. And I think that thing about trying to do the same thing across different mediums with different restrictions and what have you, it's actually quite an interesting thing.
Even a book and an audio book, which you'd think wouldn't be that different, but actually, especially in their case, is. So I think we should go and have a little chat with Jay Foreman and Mark Cooper-Jones of Map Men.
The Map Men.
Failing writers, failing writers, failing writers.
Well, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast. I don't know how do I address you? Do you get addressed as the Map Men? an awful lot? And do you feel like you've lost your individuality because of that?
We've genuinely had arguments about, well, not arguments, but we actually have had to answer this question whether we have a "the" in our name, because we've just done this book and the publishers have been saying to us, well, we're going to have on the back, it's going to say, this is the book from Mapmen or the book from the Mapmen. I was like, oh, I'm not sure now, because that definite article changes everything. It makes it sound like that refers to us rather than the show that we're in. So the answer is we don't know. What do you think sounds better?
Well, it's clearly the only thing we're quibbling over is whether there's a "the" or not. I mean, yes, we have lost our identities. We no longer have names. We are either the Mapmen or Mapmen, and those are the only two choices.
Wow.
My wife calls me the one on the left from Mapmen.
Yeah.
Like a cartographic Ant and Dec situation.
Do they have sides? They do, don't they?
Ant and Dec famously have sides. Whenever you see them on TV, whether they're presenting or just going about their business in Chiswick, they always stand Ant and
Very
Dec.
strict.
And I guess that's just for the primal branding, just to make sure that, even the casualist viewer doesn't ever get them mixed up.
But don't they stand Dec and Ant?
No, they stand alphabetically. They stand Ant on the left and Dec, don't they?
Not in my head. I think they're Dec and Ant.
Let's everybody Google Ant and Dec and see what comes up.
I think you're right. I think Dec's on the left.
No, I think they're Ant. I'm pretty sure they're Ant and Dec.
Well, I just had a quick Google, and 1, 2, 3, 4, all 5 of them have Ant on the left and Dec on the right. And I don't know if that's alphabetical or if that's because Ant is taller and your eyes scan down. These are the sort of things that I didn't think mattered until we had to make decisions about like where Mark and I sit, if we're going to sit in the same place every time. And Mark, you've actually mentioned this to me, that you're not entirely happy about the places we sit in Mapmen.
Well, I was fine about it, but I listened to a rather popular podcast called The Rest is Entertainment that I'm sure some people will have heard of. And in that they were talking, I think it was on that, I think they were talking about how, on the difference between US and UK chat shows. And on US chat shows, the host is always on the right. And on UK chat shows, the host is always on the left and the guests are on the right, right? Imagine whatever, Graham Norton, Jonathan Ross. And apparently that is because in the US, the talk show host is sort of the most important person. They are more important than the guests. They're bigger than the guests in a sense. Whereas here, you give more space to the sofa and to the guests themselves. And what I didn't realize, and implicit in that, is that sitting on the right is this sort of dominant position in your mind because you read left to right, and then so you end up, your eyes come to rest on the most important place. And I didn't realize this when Jay and I set our positions all this time ago, because I'm on the bloody left.
Definitely didn't realise this.
No, I'm fuming now. Like, you end up settling on Jay's face.
But if we were ever to swap positions, people would get confused. They wouldn't know who was who.
They wouldn't know which one was Ant and which one was Dec, would they?
Well, because we're quite interchangeable. That's the problem with Mark and me, is that neither of us is like quite distinctive compared to the other. Like we're
faceless characters that...
Just a couple of white guys with faint beards.
Yeah, it gets worse. We both have a son with the same name. I named mine first. Jay named his after mine.
Yeah. Our wives have the same birthday. We drive the same car.
They were born on the same day. Not even just the same birthday. They were literally born on the same day. It's pathetic.
We both work on this series called Mapmen. It's starting to get weird.
The coincidences.
Have you, off at a tangent, but have you ever seen the film Fight Club?
Yeah, I have seen that.
Are you implying that Mark and I have never been seen in the same room by anybody?
I'm just, there's a possibility. I just wanted to float it before. I don't know. But anyway, thanks for coming on and talking about your book. It's been lovely having you.
We're here to talk about more than that.
We probably should cover some of that. I think from that brief discussion, though, people will realise that when you do get hold of a subject, you do like to drill down into it and really investigate
really rag it around.
Yeah, I had to, a minute into that, I was like, hang on, wait, what are we here to talk about? Because it's definitely not this.
But I mean, I'm on board with that. I love the stuff. I'm reading the book, and just it's the drilling down, the deep dives, it's fascinating. I mean, in that conversation, I was thinking, well, if that's the case, if what Mark says is true, we should probably look at Chinese talk shows to see whether that still follows the right to left thing, because obviously they're left to right and what have you.
Well, there they operate a system of weights and pulleys where the most important person in the room sort of goes up and down depending whose turn it is to speak.
Yes, because it's very much a height hierarchy of, and the depth of bowing and thing. Anyway, but that's my point,
So on those old vertical televisions in the 50s that they don't make anymore.
So tell us, for the love of God, tell us about your book.
Who's going first?
Well, who's going to do it?
Whoever's most important. That would be Jay, he's on the right.
It's got to be Jay then, I suppose, yeah.
Well, so our book, it's the book version of Mapmen, the YouTube series. We got approached by some publishers. We got approached by a few publishers, and we ended up saying yes to HarperCollins because the conditions seemed right. And we were given the challenge of turning our YouTube series, which is a comedy sketch show all about maps and geography, each episode about 10 minutes long, combination of us sitting behind our desks and silly sketches, turning that into a book. And what we settled on was a book where there are maps in there, but you don't have to look at them. They're like nice illustrations for some stories about maps. And the book is called This Way Up, When Maps Go Wrong, open brackets, and Why It Matters, close brackets. And what we were trying to go for is the reading equivalent of watching an episode of Map Men. So you'll learn something, hopefully, and you'll have a little titter, hopefully. And it'll be a combination of well-researched facts and some silly tangents. And it took longer to write than we were expecting.
A lot longer.
Yeah.
3 to 4 times as long. But back to that point about whether we have names or what our identity truly is. We looked on one of the... I can't remember whether it was Amazon or Waterstone's websites that are selling the book the other day, because that's how we spend our time now. But it's only on pre-sale at the moment. It's out in October, but at the end of October. But one of them, it said authors. And I mean, on the front of the book, it says Mark Cooper Jones and Jay Foreman as the authors, right? It also has the words Map Men somewhere. But on this website, it said authors, Map Men, and Map Men.
So Tom was right.
They
You are
realised they were
actually the same person.
but addressed us both by our correct
Or were they
names.
maybe just paying homage to your theme tune on the YouTube?
Ah, yes, maybe it's that.
Oh,
Yeah.
of course.
You've done a very good job of successfully like keeping the flavour of the videos in the book.
It does, doesn't it? It really keeps the pace and the bounce and the tangential nature of it.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
Yeah,
I was
very,
wondering
very
though,
much so.
now you've done the book, are you now thinking, God, it's a lot easier just writing a book rather than doing all the writing and then the filming and doing all the graphics and the sketches and the editing and everything? Or are you actually thinking the other way around? It's easier to just
Absolutely. I'm thinking the opposite.
Right.
So it's so interesting, the difference between writing for video and writing for a book, writing for reading. Like they've got very little in common, I found, because when you're writing for video, the way Mark and I tend to work is we'll start with a script and then halfway through the writing process, it'll turn into a storyboard, which, I mean, we might talk about this in a bit, but for me, I find it a lot easier to make changes, make it snappier, make it more succinct, make it funnier when it's in a storyboard than when it's in prose. And that's because there's all sorts of extra elements that you can add and change and get rid of. And there's all sorts of different speeds you can go at. So, for example, in our videos, something we like to do very often is have jokes that you'd blink and miss, where we encourage people on YouTube to use the pause button and read loads of tiny text or look at loads of details that we've added to a map. And those jokes are very different and, very different to write to stuff that's supposed to go into everybody's ears when they watch. But when you're writing a book, there's no hiding place for gags like that. Everything you write has to be read at the same speed. And so it's a very, very different process. And I found it a lot more challenging than I was expecting.
And you squeezed some of them into the footnotes, didn't you? And that kind of does half the job of that.
That's it. I think we tried to do a bit of that. Tried to use things like the footnotes or doodles occasionally, or sort of silly annotations on maps that have been properly designed for us by a wonderful design team. And just, I suppose sometimes with Map Men, the YouTube series, it sort of looks like an educational video from the 90s, but where you slightly push the edges of, you push the frame of what you would expect that thing to look like with a bit of silly graphics, whatever it might be, or an upside down head, something. And we tried to do that in the book. And we did find there were ways of doing that, Jay. Obviously not in the same way as you're talking about in terms of like quick gags like that. But you're right. I think trying to use things like the footnotes, or sort of whether it be a blank page or a sort of redaction of some sort, or whatever it might be, there were sort of still ways that you could push that frame of the format. That's definitely something we think is those are in our instincts, our writing instincts, to sort of take what you would expect to see on the page or on the screen, and then, I mean, it's sort of, I feel like I'm just describing what comedy is, but slightly subvert your expectations of that thing.
It is, but that's all about using the tools available. So with video, filmmaking in general, there are so many different things that you can add and change and use. And there are fewer of them in book, but there are some things that could only work in book form that we wouldn't be able to translate the same gag into a video. So there was one bit where we say, the following thing is a little bit complicated, and so in the interest of brevity, we'll keep it to one sentence. And then that sentence goes on for 4 pages. And that's the sort of thing I don't think we could get away with in the video. It's like, it's a literary joke.
Yeah.
And then there's also the joke about redactions, where we actually came to a bit of a problem translating our book into audiobook, which is yet another different form. And there's one bit where there's a redaction bit that sort of, if we had faithfully translated it into audio with, say, a beeping sound for every big black square redaction, it would have been impossible to listen to. It would have gone on too long and been really annoying. And we had to work out, oh, this is a big format change. We're going to have to work out what's the equivalent funny joke for somebody listening that doesn't hurt your ears for about half an hour.
If you'd put effort into the creativity, though, Jay, I think would you have not made the redactions in beeps translating Morse code to something, to a little gag? But that's fine.
Maybe.
If you didn't want to do the legwork, that's fine.
People have taken it on themselves. There's a whole genre of videos on YouTube called reaction videos, which I have mixed feelings about. But there's this guy who's sort of one particular guy who watches and reacts to all of our videos, including meticulously pausing every blink and miss it joke to try and like interpret what could the gag be.
Oh wow.
And you actually watch him Google stuff if he doesn't get it. It's excruciating and hilarious. And I watched someone talk about, oh, is there secret Morse code in this video where they talk about Morse code? And the answer on that occasion was, no, it's just random noise because it would have gone on for too long. But people expect us, because we hide things everywhere. They assume there must be something worth looking for everywhere. That, you know, there's no corner where there's not an actual joke. But sometimes no, sometimes it's just noise.
Next they'll be playing it backwards and finding satanic meanings in it and things like that. You know? We must proof check them for that.
I was going to say, one of my favourite little bits of the book, we're talking about footnotes and stuff, and this is testimony to the joyful little nuggets of silliness to be found throughout the book. You quote some French sort of anti-capitalist anarchist fella.
Guy Debord is his name. Yeah.
Spelt Guy Debord.
Yeah.
That's it. And you quote him, and his quote is, "The introduction of alterations such as more or less arbitrarily transposing maps of two different regions can contribute to clarifying certain wanderings that express not subordination to randomness." And at the end of that, there's an asterisk which leads to the word park life.
Yes.
I have to credit Jay.
I just thought that is beautiful.
We weren't allowed in the audiobook that we recorded this last week, and the producer of our audiobook says, right, you're not allowed to actually sing the words park life because that's a copyright infringement.
Oh no.
We spent about 15 minutes just going park life,
trying to get it slightly
trying
off.
to make it close enough that you go, oh, that's funny, that's the park life thing. Because when you went park life, we tried versions that were park life, and it obviously didn't work at all. And it was really irritating. We were like really up against it that day in terms of trying to get the amount of recording we needed to get done. And then we're just there
spent an hour on
park
park
life
life.
for 15 minutes.
This is the sort of thing you don't think about when you're writing the book. So
We say that, well, there is quite a bit in the book about the audiobook being tricky because of the maps.
there is now, because we sort of like retroactively put in loads of things that say, or if you're listening to the audiobook, how are we going to do this in
Hang
the
on, I'm going
audiobook?
to disagree with you there, Jay. They weren't retroactive. I think probably what they're referring to is that footnote which comes in like the second or third chapter, I think it is. Maybe it's the first chapter. And that was written really early on. And it was interesting, this. And this is a difference between Jay and I, because Jay was always thinking about the audiobook. And the reason for that is Jay has never read a book. Jay only listens to audiobooks. This is an exclusive. Jay hasn't read a book. No, he has read some books, but he's much more of an audiobook listener. And I've actually never listened to an audiobook. So naturally, Jay, quite instinctively, as he was writing, was thinking like, oh, okay, so how are we going to do this? Because obviously the way people consume books is on audio. And I just was like, Jay, it doesn't matter. We'll do the best thing for the book. And we'll think about that down the line. And in a sense, we were sort of both right, because it was right to think of the book. But then when it did come to the audiobook, there were times where I was like, I had it in my hands with what we had done. Particularly the long chapter which demands a specifically described type of American accent, which I had to read for a number of pages, and that was a long day.
Because I was saying throughout the process of writing that unusual chapter, I was saying, Mark, are you sure this is going to work in the audiobook? And your response every time was, don't worry about it now. Don't worry now. We will sort it out at the time. And then when it came to it, like quite literally the day before, you were still saying, oh, I've just realised this is going to be really difficult.
I feel like we haven't actually really described what the book's actually about. There's quite a lot of really shit maps in your book. Like if you want to use this book to like get somewhere, don't.
That's right.
Because most of the maps are crap, which sounds like a criticism, but it's not. The subtitle of the book is When Maps Go Wrong and Why It Matters.
Yeah, we just love bad maps. I think kind of, it's all very well looking at a perfectly or seemingly accurate and very good representation of the world, but far more fun to look at something where you're like, hang on, that has either changed or is completely wrong or has been spelt badly or whatever it might be. And that's sort of part of the fun of looking at old maps, isn't it? And the sort of wobbly borders they created or whatever it might be, or, you know, like a 14th century rendering of the British Isles. You're like, okay, that is sort of hilarious. And sort of unpicking that. And so I suppose the motivation behind the book was that there's often a really good story behind something and how a map ended up with its whatever particular type of wrongness.
Which is where the Map Men YouTube thing kind of flourished from, wasn't it? That was the whole kind of thing about that interest in maps that are wrong or different or the story behind it and stuff. So my question was going to be, how did you find the content and the stories for this?
Well, the good news about maps is we will never run out of topics, because you can think of almost any story in the world, and there is some way of representing it through a map. And so sometimes if you actually look at what we've done on MapMen, a lot of the stories are not really about maps at all. We just use a map as a window to get into this story that could be about anything, like in history or politics or culture or what have you. But we thought for this book, because we were talking specifically about maps that go wrong, or actually the first idea we had was maps that get you lost. And so we found ourselves doing it that way round, where we find the map first and then let's find a story to talk about.
Yeah, that was actually the working title for it, wasn't it? It was something like 16 or 16 and a half maps to get you lost. And really that's sort of the same as maps that went wrong. It's that title changed halfway through the book to something just maybe a little bit clearer. But I mean, in terms of, was the question, Tom, about where we got the ideas for the maps in the book or for MapMen series in general?
No, in the book, really. Just that were the ones that you weren't able to do, that you had kind of under your hat?
I can tell you one way we didn't get them, and that is by Jay reading a book. That didn't happen.
Obviously.
Yeah, obviously.
We know our strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah. Very good at storyboarding. That's a difficult question, though. I'm still trying to think about that. I mean, it took a long
Hold on a minute.
time.
Was this ghost written? Is this where is this one big?
This is the big reveal, isn't it?
Chat GPT, please write a book about maps.
It's interesting. You get a clause in your. We did, and I think it's pretty across the board in publishing. But you get a clause in your contract about using AI. Now they're very, very, very wary that books are not being written by AI in any way, and it would sort of nullify your entire thing if you had done that.
Wow.
We knew about some of the maps already. Obviously, kind of in our map travels, there were a couple that were sort of stories we wanted to tell, and would work. We felt would work better in the book, actually. So, and actually, an almost example of this is there's a chapter about. There's a very, very, I'm going to say niche, but I think niche often works in our world. But chapter about how ITV divided up Britain into the regions that it had and became. That was something Jay had sort of imagined as a YouTube series, actually, at one point. Then realised that it was a great map that had gone wrong, and you had so much prior knowledge on that, Jay, because you'd essentially researched the whole subject, and this is why the drafts came in quite long, and needed quite a lot of editing. But it's so factually rich, that particular chapter, because you knew it inside out.
I think that's a good example of that's a story that is not necessarily a story to map. So I'd put a lot of effort into it was going to be like, I had this idea that I don't know is going to happen anymore, a YouTube series about the history of British TV, and I had in mind there was going to be an episode about the history of ITV. And I'd already done this research. And when Mark and I were trying to think of examples of bad maps, I realized that the story of ITV's regions includes a terrible map. And so I thought this actually can be very easily converted into a chapter for the book. But now that you know that, you can read through it and go, oh, that's why there's all this information in here that really has nothing at all to do with geography, and why there's a whole page about how Groucho Marx used to do his own sponsors on American TV. That's not a map fact, but in it goes if it's interesting and if it's a relevant tangent.
Yeah.
We wanted to avoid any subjects we'd covered before. That was kind of important to us. There's sort of one caveat to that. We have done an episode about trap streets before, which are these really interesting quirks of maps where basically in the old days to stop, well, actually
copyright protection.
Yeah, copyright protection, exactly. People would put an intentional tiny little wrong road or a close on there that wasn't there. And then if somebody else copied your map and had written that close on, you knew that they hadn't gone and done their own survey and that they had just copied your data. The thing is, in a book about when maps go wrong, that just felt like something we really wanted to include. And thankfully, there was a story that we hadn't really covered in the episode that we did before. So we very much zeroed in on that story, and hopefully it didn't feel too much like we were repeating ourselves. But other than that, we tried to go for all new topics. And then I think another one that springs to mind in terms of how we found them, and it's kind of my favorite chapter. I don't think it's the best, but I think it's my favorite because of finding it in this way. Was just, again, it was like some kind of came across some small citation in something I was reading about the GDR for a different chapter, a chapter about Soviet maps. I ended up reading about this Hungarian map author who'd written a book, and it was very obscure, and I couldn't find it in English or anything, but realized that he'd written a chapter about Columbus's brother in his book. And I'd sort of never heard of Christopher Columbus's brother, but it turned out he was a map maker and somebody who was really integrally involved in trying to get Christopher Columbus the patronage that he needed to sponsor his trip that ended up in discovering the New World accidentally. But what his brother did was intentionally make maps really wrong in order to sort of help persuade whichever king and queen they were talking to that the route west to the spices of the Indies that Columbus was looking for was the best route. And he did this in a couple of really interesting ways, and I won't go into it here, but just finding that sort of in the way I did, which felt quite fortuitous. And there's not a huge amount that's been written on it. It was quite a difficult chapter to research, and there are a couple of English papers that have been written about this, but not loads. That part of the reason that's my favourite is because it felt a bit more privileged, and it was like trying to find a couple of things out of the way that people wouldn't have heard of or know. And I'd be surprised if many people who are not sort of real cartographic nerds would have ever heard of Bartholomew Columbus and sort of his role in that story. But it's actually quite a big role. So that was, I really liked it for that reason, sort of stumbling across it in that way.
And it was your idea as well, Mark, which makes it all the better.
Oh, yeah, of course. So, yeah, I hate that ITV chapter.
Better than the crappy ITV chapter. Did you have any arguments?
What's wonderful is we found a way of telling this story about the huge role that Bartholomew Columbus played. And it's almost like, it's not quite original, but it's, like very few people know this story, and we're bringing it to people and making it accessible. And we've also had the fun of every single time we mention him in the chapter, he's called Columbus's brother. I think the word brother appears in that chapter about 100 times.
Poor chap. Did you have any arguments about what would be included or not? Did you get to angry late night phone calls or texts or... It's ridiculous.
Oh, what's the most heated discussion we've had?
I would like... What's your answer to that, Jay? I wonder how you see it. Did we have arguments?
Sometimes we have very heated discussions, very passionate discussions about whether something should go in or not go in. And sometimes it's about the precise phrasing of something, like whether there's a "the" in Mapmen. I can't remember the specifics, but Mark and I have this. We're very lucky that we're able to have these discussions because we both care a lot about the final product. And it's never personal, because I think like with comedy writing, you sort of need to be able to tell, if you're working in a group, you need to be able to both say and hear, that's not funny, do better. And we're able to do that. And I think it works very well. But as for any specific arguments in this book, I don't remember. I must have blocked them all out of my head.
I mean, none of them actually stand out. Obviously, there were disagreements, like you say. I don't remember sort of losing it over a particular issue and going to bed feeling cross about it or anything like that. I think, to the sort of bigger point on this, it's like a partnership, which is sort of what this is now, it is inherently a very fragile thing. You have two people trying to do something creatively and obviously are going to disagree. And there are all sorts of reasons it can go bad. It can go bad professionally because of professional difference. It can go bad because of personal differences. It can go bad because of business decisions. There's so many reasons. And I think we're quite lucky in this, Jay, because I think we have a really, really good balance of standing firm when we believe something, but never digging our heels in so much that it becomes an issue of pride or an issue of I'm not backing down on this for the sake of not backing down on this. It never becomes about something else.
Yeah, I think that's really important, isn't it?
I really value that in this partnership. I think we have managed to find a way of making it about the thing somehow.
Yeah, there's a method that we have that I think has served us in very good stead, is that whenever we reach some sort of deadlock where one of us wants it one way and the other one wants it the other way, we end up usually siding with the person whose chapter or whose episode it was at the start, because that often means that person did have a clear vision and that person sort of, gets on this occasion to get the veto, because it was their chapter, it was their idea. And, if you stick with the original idea, you'll end up with something more coherent. And so that actually means that we're very lucky that we do have an ombudsman, which is just like remembering who started the chapter. True. And that's why sometimes I'll get my way and sometimes Mark will get his way. And overall, I think it works.
I think Tom and I have a similar thing, to be fair. that we do it.
Yeah, as you say, it's about making sure it's not personal.
Yeah,
exactly.
And the idea becomes a separate entity that you can both look at from externally.
Well, without being too gushy, I think, like one of the reasons that I'm often very happy to sort of defer to Mark, even if maybe, I wanted it that way, I was sure this was the better idea, is that Mark is really excellent writer and very, very funny and worth trusting. And a lot of the time, if I'm not sure about something, it is very relaxing. I'm very privileged that I'm able to say, Mark knows what he's doing.
I'm going to clip that up. I'm going to play that back to you at various points.
This has ended up being a lot more beautiful than I thought it would be.
Isn't it lovely? We need to play some nice music and like nice romantic music over there.
Sometimes you're wrong.
I'm going to turn that into a song. I'm going to turn that little bit into a whole song.
Without being too gushy.
Without being too gushy, and very, very funny.
I'm going to clip that up.
And very, very funny.
I'm going to turn that into a song.
Like the opposite of the Vinland map, Mark's totally legit. Jay's in love with his brain, he's map man enough to admit. Don't need no ordnance survey to know Mark's dropping bombs. And that's why we are here in the Cooper Jones Appreciation Song.
I'm going to clip that up. I'm going to turn that into a song.
It's actually really interesting talking to people who've written a book like yours, because it is a factual book, but it's also a piece of creative fiction as well at the same time. It's
you put a lot of yourself into it.
It's like the worst of both worlds in terms of working on it, in terms of the effort that needs to go into it.
It's almost like a limitation where you're making something entertaining, but you're restricted by it must be factually correct. And actually the other way around works too. Like, you're having to educate someone, you have to convey these facts, but you're limited by, it's got to hold people's attention. It must be funny. So I think part of what makes it fun is doing both of those at once and making sure it's not just, don't declare it's boring by putting it in a funny box. Like try to make the facts funny themselves. And that's part of the challenge that we love, I think.
You say that about facts, Jay, but actually you put a lot of brilliant, spurious facts. I mean, you sprinkle spurious facts all the time into your videos and into the book as well.
And I quite like how you don't necessarily call it out in the book as well. You're just assuming that the reader is up to speed with what
the reader will know. This is bullshit.
I remember the first chapter that came back from the editor. We sent them chapter by chapter to the editor. Well, actually, initially we did. So he just wanted to check that we could actually write, because there was no clear evidence that we necessarily could. And he sent back the first chapter that we'd written, marked up. But absolutely, the first spurious fact, he was like, "Surely not." I was like, "Uh-oh."
Yeah. There will be some jokes in here, guys. Can I just tell you that before we start editing all of it?
To be totally fair to our editor, he did say, "Oh wait, hang on, is this intentional?" In which case, funny. But we quite like that grey area where you might read it. That's true. Yeah,
brilliant. It's quite good though. That gives you a massive get out of jail card when you do make a massive mistake on a fact, doesn't it?
Yes,
well, that was a joke. Obviously,
no, we intentionally made it very close to the truth and something that you can actually find on Wikipedia, but isn't true. But it was a joke by us.
Perfect plan.
In terms of like collaborating, so when you were writing this book, were you doing like a chapter each and then you'd kind of swap it over, give it to the other person? And how did it work? Or were you kind of writing together? Do you know what I mean? Like a word each or whatever?
It's the former. So like with Map Men episodes and also with this book, really, I think 90% of the time it's Mark who comes up with the idea for what the chapter or the episode is going to be about, because Mark has a much better, broader knowledge of maps and geography than I do and is very good at ideas and very, very good at research. But then after that stage, we will then decide who's doing what, and we'll sort of pick who's going to write the episode based on their strengths or how much they already know, or whether they just bagsied it first. We'll then go away and write our episodes separately and then bring them back to show each other and mark each other's homework. And that bit takes just as long as writing.
Yeah.
So what you'll end up with by the end of it is an episode that's got so much of both of our fingerprints all over it, so much of each other's graffiti that you can't tell whose episode it was.
I was going to say that.
So that's interesting. Yeah. So you both write a full episode of that same episode and then mash them together?
Sort of. We've got different styles. So like Mark will bring to the table what looks like a full episode. You could go ahead and make it. And I will bring a messy bunch of bullet points with all sorts of strange color formatting things where it says insert research here or insert gag here. And we start in very different ways, but we've learned over the years to write in each other's styles and to sort of preempt, he's going to say this if I do that. So I'm going to, put this in.
That's true. Yeah, I think the thing about doing it that way is, and this comes to how long we thought it was going to take versus how long it did take, is, writing a book together doesn't take half the time. That sounds obvious.
Quadruples.
You know, even at the end when we were sort of going through essentially a finished book, but like going over it for sort of the third time, just sort of making sure things go, actually, I don't know about this. It's like, if it was just me, I would just be making changes. But actually, we had to call each other on everything, or we're just sitting there on Teams, basically doing the job. And then these little things become a discussion, and it becomes so much slower.
Yeah.
That kind of going over it and agreeing, essentially getting a double tick for every sentence by the end. And actually, that's
and it would. I mean, the thing is, we're overdoing it, but I think it's because we're used to, like, what we've spent 10 years honing is writing something that's very tightly scripted and edited and goes on for about 10 minutes. Actually, it used to be even less. Like our first series of Map Men, the episodes tended to be about 3 minutes. So we're used to being very short and snappy. You know, it's like copywriting for adverts. It has to be, every word has to count.
Yeah.
And writing an entire book, like more than 300 pages like that, like, no wonder it took all year.
How long does it take you to write an episode or to create an episode? Because I was wondering how many people are involved in production. It looks like this sort of little homespun thing that you do, but I imagine...
Well, that's the look we want to go for. I think part of the aesthetic is we want people to watch it and go, I could do that. That's just the two of them having fun. Like, that's clearly a shed. But we do have people helping us, and we always, like, you know, a day of filming will always go much faster if there's somebody else there to sometimes to just literally press the button on the camera and make our lives easier, but also to direct us and help us with things and advise us and, you know, come up with ideas and make props and stuff. And over the years, that's been a combination of Mark's wife, my wife, various people we've worked with. There's always somebody else in the room when we make Map Men.
Yeah, well, actually, there isn't always, is there? There is sometimes. I
when
would
there
say
isn't, it takes all day.
What you do need somebody, obviously, there are plenty of times we need somebody to help with the camera, and like you say, props, other bits. But actually, generally, I think the answer to that is that we do the bulk of it. I mean, there have been lots of days where we just filmed on our own, the two of us, where we set it up, and I mean, you know, all the props and stuff are very cheap and cheerful. So I think it has that aesthetic for a reason. It might be intentional as well, but it is also because we don't have a big team or anything.
No, but we get a comment often that says, "Oh, I love how on Map Men part of the look is that everything looks a bit shit." Like, well, that's not entirely on purpose. We want it to look nice.
Oh, really? I thought it was on purpose.
But, you know, we've got stretched budgets and time available, and, you know, we've both got young kids, and so a lot of the time, like, the filming is more rushed than we'd like it to be, and so some of the props are a little bit slapdash, but we're lucky that it's comedy and that we can use that as a virtue, and that there are always ways, if something goes wrong on filming day, which it often does, there are always ways in the edit to use that to our advantage. Like, oh, this bit didn't work. Okay, great, let's turn it into a joke. Let's add a bit of graphics. There's a great example I've just thought of. We filmed a scene on one of the hottest days of the year last year, and it was just Mark and me standing in front of the camera talking. It wasn't that interesting a scene, but then we watched it back and Mark goes, is there anything you can do about the fact that I am drenched in sweat? It's really distracting and off-putting. And so last second, because we had like a day or two before we had to give it to the sponsor, and so I just put a big cardboard cutout of a globe on top of where Mark's head should be and made it talk like a Terry Gilliam animation. And then I realized that's a good idea. We should have done that from the start. So that was a limitation that made us put something in. But because it's comedy, we can do that. If you're making a serious drama, if something goes wrong, you got to do it again.
You can't swear like that in the drama.
I don't think the post-production would be the same.
Like,
like, I don't know, some big BBC costume drama. And just go, we'll just put a map on his head.
Well, with budgets now what they are.
They'd have to rewrite it so that he had some sort of gland-based issue. They'd have to go back and film a scene when he was young, like he always sweats in a certain situation.
Kids teasing him, calling him Globehead or something like that, and then it all makes sense. Yeah, no, it's funny. I was going to say the same thing about the book when you were talking about. It's the limitations of the medium sometimes, though, isn't it, that really spurs on creativity and getting the most out, wringing the most out of it. Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
it wasn't really a question. That was a statement. That was a terrible interview.
I agree. Well, I'm going to agree with.
But we can all agree, can't we?
Perfect statement.
Thank you. Has it surprised you how well Map Men has done?
Oh God, yeah. Of course, yes. It's you definitely don't start out, especially when we did it, which was it 2015 or 2016, Jay?
Depends.
Depends on the truth. Yeah.
Yeah, 2015.
Like so. There were YouTubers in 2015, but there weren't loads. It wasn't a career. It didn't look like a career to almost anybody. So it's not why we started doing it was because we were expecting some sort of career in YouTube, which is what it has become now. We were comedians on the live circuit at the time, and I was doing stand-up. I also was in a sketch group, and my stand-up was sort of geeky and all about being a geography teacher, which was something I'd been. And Jay did sort of a lot of musical comedy as well as some kids shows, but the musical comedy was very, very funny, and had set up this YouTube thing on the side. I'm sort of answering a different question here, but in a roundabout way. But I was going to the Edinburgh Festival and stuff, and the stand-up I was doing was fine, and sort of performing to 40, 50 people, or maybe some more on some gigs, but generally then festival, it's like a nice little polite crowd coming, and you sort of get to the end of the Edinburgh Festival, and you go, oh, some people said some nice things, but what now? I'll just sort of wait another year and I'll do it again. And that's sort of a feeling a lot of people who do the Edinburgh Festival would probably relate to. And I was like, is there anything else I can do here? Sort of another medium. And I sort of saw that Jay had made a couple of series on this burgeoning but still young channel.
His London ones.
The London ones, Unfinished London. Yeah, I think he'd done maybe a politics unboringed series as well at that point. But I sort of liked the geekiness of it.
You sort of liked the geekines.
Yeah, they were all right. They were all right. Okay. I knew I could help.
You could make it better.
That's good. I see what you're doing. It's not bad. But no, I was mostly just looking at the YouTube thing and thinking, God, it'd be fun to reach. Jay was getting like 1,000 views. 1,000 views. Yes, that'd be so good. Rather than that's like a whole Edinburgh run in one.
Did you know Jay then?
I knew we weren't friends. We would probably, if we walked past each other in the old town in Edinburgh, we'd probably sort of nod and maybe say hello, but we wouldn't be sure if we should be stopping. But I don't think we'd stop. We wouldn't stop, would we? We definitely wouldn't have stopped. We would have just gone, oh, hi, and walked past.
I remember nodding at you. Yeah, we were nodders in 2010.
Nods. There were some good nods, and we were nothing more than acquaintances. And as is the case for sort of a lot of people on the amateur circuit, if you like the fringe circuit, you end up gigging with people or seeing their shows and knowing them by name and as rivals and competitors as well sometimes. But and so but I think I approached you, Jay, right, to be like, look, I've got this idea for a thing. We could do something about maps. I think maps are sort of cool, but it was a way of just like in my head, it's like if 1,000 people see that is so worth my while. That'd be absolutely brilliant. There was no sense that it was something you could monetize. I think your channel was not a monetized thing in any way at that point.
No, I didn't know that was a thing. I hadn't switched it on, and I think even if I had, it wouldn't have. It would have made pennies because we weren't making it with any kind of eye to appealing to the most people possible. It was very, very geeky and niche, and the reason we were doing it was because we could show it to TV producers and say, here, give us a job in proper telly because look what we can do. It
was a shop window. Yeah. It was just a shop window.
It was never meant to have any kind of large appeal. As delightful that it did, that a lot of people took to it. It turns out there's more map geeks out there or people that like the kind of comedy that we like making out there than we thought. And so we just, without really thinking about why we're doing it, we just kept doing it. And then 10 years later, we stopped doing all of our other jobs.
It was really amazing to see just that we sort of called it a series because we shot them all in one go. And it was about 6 episodes, I think 5 or 6. And they were getting thousands. I can't remember what in like the first month or whatever they got, but it was way beyond our expectations. And it was sort of like, oh my goodness, this is absolutely incredible. But then what happened is I'm answering a question I haven't been asked yet, but I quit comedy. I was sort of a bit like, I'm not sure it's really for me. And I was really into I wanted to try my hand at something different. And I went into television documentaries as a whole new career at the age of like 30, 31, I think it was. But then, and I think I was just like, great, I'm sort of fine with that. And I've had a nice time in comedy, but that's done. And then Jay called me and was like, these videos are sort of doing quite well. And actually, there's 1 or 2 sponsors getting in touch and we can maybe make a bit of money. Do you want to make another series? And I was like, well, okay, why not? I can probably do that on the side and on the weekends. And so really the last 8 or 9 years have been that. There's been me having a full-time job and then sort of trying to squeeze in doing it with Jay around that. But it's only now that I think we're like, do you know what? It really has surpassed all expectations and it really deserves a bit more of certainly my time and attention. We've still got so many sort of map ideas that we would like to do and put out there that I think we're sort of basically going to because we're quite infrequent posters. We haven't actually really posted a Mapmen video in about a year.
Yeah.
And partly that's the book, but partly that's and that's partly having young kids, but also it's been just, not having the time and having another job and all that.
It creates a pent-up demand, though, doesn't it, Mark?
Yeah,
There is definitely
that's the problem now.
Do you not feel that? There is a real demand, like people are waiting for the next one.
Well, yeah, maybe if we actually put out 7 in a year, people would just be like, okay, I'm done with this now.
That wasn't what I meant, but you might be right.
No, I understand what you're saying, but like, yeah, it's to your question, it's totally surpassed expectations. It was never intended to be the thing, and now it is the thing, and obviously we love it, and it's great having it as the thing, but that has been a lovely sort of life surprise, I think.
Yeah, it's been really wonderful. And we're trying to sort of like use the same method for making it that we had right at the start. We want it to be jokes that we ourselves would enjoy without thinking, oh, will enough people understand this obscure reference? Like, it's important to go, I don't care if they have to do their homework to get the reference, No,
you need to make it for you. Yeah.
That's the thing is, like, in the modern day, when you're making stuff on YouTube, the way to get more eyeballs onto your video is to make it as niche as possible. If you try and make something broad that is going to appeal to every single demographic you can think of, no one's going to love it. But there are enough people out there in the world that are into the kind of weird humor that we're into and the kind of geeky map facts that we've made the sort of thing we do, that we should just stick at it. And it seems to be working. So we better not change the format.
No, and there'll be plenty more listeners out. I mean, when John hadn't actually really watched any of your stuff before I tipped him off, and I was so jealous. Because I thought, oh my God, he's got all these videos to watch. Fresh.
I am very new to the joys of Map Men. It's true.
Properly jealous. Do you not have a list of films in your mind that when you go old and lose your memory and stuff that you want to go back and watch for the first time, kind of thing? And I felt like that.
That's quite dark, isn't it? Suddenly, like,
is that just me that has a list of films?
That's an interesting thought. A film that you love so much, you want to be able to eternal sunshine yourself so that you can enjoy it for the first time.
Dementia film.
That's probably already a celebrity podcast on BBC Sounds.
It's a good
already.
idea.
I like it. It's got me thinking about my
Put
dad.
the video on quick. I've only got a few. I'm not going to squeeze in Lord of the Rings, but I might get half a Goodfellas in.
I'm going to bring it back to maps. Shall I do that? This is a nice childish question for you, but do you both have a favourite map?
Oh God, I need an answer to this question.
We get asked this a lot. We should have a stock answer.
I need an answer to this question.
I have an answer. I genuinely used to love leafing through the pages of the London A to Z because it is a fascinating read and it is a beautiful map and it is better to look at and I think more useful than Google Maps. And it's how I imagine the city now. Like if I'm walking through London, it helps me orient myself to sort of imagine I'm on an orange street now. If I turn left, this is a yellow street. And, and they are beautiful to look at. And the story behind it is fascinating too. So my dull answer is yes, my favorite map is the London A to Z. And Mark has a different answer every time. What is it this week, Mark?
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't have a favourite map, do I? I love Ordnance Survey maps. I just love looking at Ordnance Survey maps. They're so classic. And
well, that's a good answer. Why not?
Yeah, it is a good answer. I don't know, but then sometimes I want to pull out a...
Don't feel like your heart's in it though, Mark.
Because I think, do you know why it is? It's because there's so many Ordnance Survey maps. I feel like I'm not picking a map. I sort of, in my head, I want to answer that question by saying, it's the 1784 Zimbabwe second edition, something, because it's got a particular peculiarity about it. But I don't have an answer to that, so I'm just going to have to be honest.
It depends how knowledgeable or how map geeky you want to sound.
Yeah, and I want to sound really knowledgeable. That's the, and clearly I'm not.
Well, the other thing is, I think it's important that we don't come across. I don't want our videos to look like it's been made by a couple of absolute map geeks that are, obsessed with the finer details. I think what it should be appealing to people that don't know whether or not they care about maps at all. And I make sure that we're making these things for a new and growing audience first and for an audience of dedicated geeks second. Like they're going to watch it anyway. I'm always concerned about making it, I don't know, I said I didn't want to make it too broad, but I think, I always think of these videos as comedy sketch shows first and niche geography second. And I think that, the humor should be something that I would enjoy. But the geography has to be something that feels accessible to everybody.
Which is why every time I write the word cartography in an episode, it ends up being crossed out and changed to map making, essentially, or something, which is totally right. It's totally right. But yes.
Yeah, it's got to be entertaining, hasn't it? That's the bottom line to start off with.
Yeah, that is the trick of that.
Well, we found out that some of our videos get used by geography teachers who want a 10-minute break. And it means that there's something that we have to do now that we never used to bother with in the early days, which was fact-checking. The idea that it's a comedy sketch show first and happens to be about maps second, yes, I still want to stick to that. But on the other hand, we'll get in trouble if we say something that's wrong, and we'll find out very quickly in the comment section.
Now you have a responsibility for the next generation on your shoulders.
We made a terrible mistake. We had an episode that was basically asking for trouble, where we tried to find out through the medium of song what was the country with the squarest shape in the world.
Oh, yes.
And that involved inevitably showing a map of every single country on the planet, which means you're going to, whether you mean to or not, you're going to upset a few people. And we went with the method of, because we had the luxury of showing each country individually, it actually means that we can show the full extent of what every country thinks it owns. So we thought we would get away with it, but then we quite accidentally, it was close to the deadline and I wasn't concentrating and I was using the fill tool. I accidentally filled in Crimea the wrong color and made it look like we were in favor of Putin's invasion of Ukraine, which was a big mistake. And people told me about it straight away. But the weird thing was, it was only on the screen for about half a second.
Wow.
Jay actually told me, though, the day after that he is in favour. He is actually in favour of it. And that's really why it happened. So he tells this story, but it's not
just
true.
a bit of cover. Just a bit of cover.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I am notoriously a Kremlin Twitter bot.
unfortunately, maps are inherently political, aren't they?
They are, yeah. Even the simplest of maps, like even somebody said this. There was an item in the news last week about how the African Union is calling for fewer people to use the Mercator projection, which is the world map that stretches the North Pole to make Greenland look like it's the same size as all of Africa and Canada look much bigger than it should be. And the African Union are correctly pointing out it makes Africa look smaller than it really is, and there should be a worldwide standard that is not the one that makes Africa look small and Europe look big. Anyway, they were pointing this out, and somebody said on TV, it was the Jeremy Vine show, I think, and they said, all maps are political, aren't they? Well, apart from, let's say, the A to Z, that's not political, is it? And the thing is, yes, it is. Even a simple map like a street map, the A to Z, it's answering a question of who the map is for and what it's meant to be used for, because you could show a map of the same area. You could show a map of London for birds, which would show a very different map indeed, and it would show where the rivers are, it would show the types of trees, it would show how far apart the trees are, and why would you bother naming the streets? So, even something as simple as a street map, it is a conversion of the real world into something that you're trying to convey. And you have to make the streets much, much wider than they really are so that you can read the map. Like every map is political or makes has an opinion in some way. And if it doesn't, it's just a photo.
So take that on board, any aspiring writers out there.
Absolutely. Well, guys, thank you. Good luck with the book. It is brilliant. I don't know if...
Thank you so much.
I think because it's so far up my street that I don't know if mine's a valid comment on it, because I think it's fantastic.
No, thank you.
But if anyone is remotely interested in maps, history, and funny little bits, then this ticks all those boxes. And it's got kind of 3 titles as well, which I think is nice. Like a cascading of titles, hasn't it? This Way Up, When Maps Go Wrong, brackets, and Why It Matters.
Yeah. Actually, there was quite a lot of debate over the and why it matters, wasn't there? That was probably one of our most heated arguments.
Was
whether
it?
we have it or not.
Yeah. Whether it matters that Why It Matters is there.
Yeah, exactly. But we won't tell you who was on what side and who got their way.
Well, I think it's bloody great. What a fantastic gift that would be for someone who likes maps at Christmas time and that kind of thing, wouldn't it?
Oh, we have brought it out at the right time for Christmas, haven't we?
I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, I suppose it would be a
just
good gift
occurred
for
to
your
me.
friend Alan who likes maps. Yeah.
Suitable for children and adults.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is it available at all good bookshops? Would you say that?
And bad
Do you know
ones.
what? It is now that I think about
That
it.
is
Yeah,
good.
it's available if you search This Way Up on the internet, and it's available from both good and bad bookshops in the UK and the US and various other territories, and in audiobook as well, now that you mention it.
Well, the Map Men, thank you very much for talking
Thank
to us.
you. Thanks, guys.
Lovely to see you guys.
Thank you so much for having us.
The lovely, lovely Map Men.
The lovely map men. Pretty great stuff there.
Yeah.
And we should say, if you're fond of a map, especially a crap map, it's a cracking book. I would very strongly recommend This Way Up.
Oh, they're going to be gutted, John. They could have called the book just Crap Maps.
Crap maps.
Got a bit more of a zing to it, that, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Rather than their 3-legged title.
Yeah. Is it too late? It's probably too late, isn't it?
It probably is now. Probably is. They can maybe put stickers on the front.
Yeah, just a big sticker
of the
across.
already printed thousands and thousands of books. But yeah, they'll probably leave it.
But yes, it really is genuinely fascinating and also very funny, and would make an excellent Christmas present for all the family.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that was splendid. Have we got anything else to discuss today, Tom?
Well, you know what we've always got up our sleeve, don't you, John?
Writing can be such a lonely business. You're tapping away night and day. Easy to think, what the hell is this all for? Nothing going my way. But remember, friend, there are people who care about those words you've carefully woven. So if you're brave enough to come and share, we'll hype you up like a freaking explosion. It's time for Hype Writer, the right type of acclaim we all need occasionally, 'cause you're a mighty fighter, the type who lights up the writing world with your beautiful words.
And this week it is long-time listener and friend of the show, Aaron J. Court.
Yes.
And what has he brought for us, John, to peruse,
to the table,
to delectate?
This is a piece called Pass and Review. Now, Aaron has sent us stuff to read in the past. He's sent like short stories, a bit of flash, and I have very much enjoyed them. But this is slightly different. This is a kind of a sort of essay memoir, which he has voiced himself, and a friend of his has done also a beautiful job of the music.
Yeah.
Shall we have a little listen?
Let's.
Pass and Review, an essay by J. Aaron Courts. Read for you by the author. When I was 5 or 6 years old, a teacher at my school died. A heart attack, as I recall. I can't remember her name, but most of the women in my life were teachers, including my grandmother, so I was taken out of school to attend her friend's, this teacher's, funeral. I'd attended my great-grandmother's funeral, but was 4 when she died, and don't remember much. Tall people crying, getting stepped on once, the smell of perfume and makeup. Around the same time, I attended my great-aunt's funeral, and 2 great-uncles, all of which are as clear as Boggy Creek's brown water. But this funeral was different and had a profound impact on me. This funeral was large, so large, in fact, it wasn't held at the local funeral home, but inside a Methodist church in Beaumont. The service was early in the morning, and the sun cast towers of light, pillars, westward across the pews and people. One rested squarely on the open casket. My grandmother held my hand as the organ played, and we walked in shuffling line with others to view the body. After so many funerals, family, friends, fellow Marines, old vets, others, I should know what that part of the service is called, but I don't. Looking at the body for the last time, that is. There's time for viewing, when it's an open casket, of course, but then there's the pass and review. Pass and review. A military drill movement where a parade of troops passes in formation before their commander. I have performed the maneuver, or more accurately, participated in the maneuver, dozens, hundreds of times, and that is all I can think to call it. I felt the weight of her dead body as we made the long walk to her. She was swelling, not literally, but her presence, in the room, in me. I forced myself to trudge through a thickening. I forced myself to look up and into the casket, to look at the imitation lying there, surrounded by folds of silk and varnished wood. She looked sunken and cold, thin-lipped and caked. Was she perfumed, or was that my grandmother? Some other woman, perhaps. I snuck my right arm into the casket and poked her right hand while my grandmother held my left. I'd cleaned dead things with my hands by that time, but they give warmth. Her body, that touch, it sucked the warmth from me, and I felt the bones in my grandmother's hand just then. I grew cold all over and pulled away from her and began to cry. "It's okay, son. She's in heaven," my grandmother said. "What matters, her soul, is in heaven. This is just her body. There's nothing to be afraid of." I wish I had spoken with her about that moment later in life. We had hard conversations as the years passed, conversations about death, conversations about her death, about the body, the soul. But I didn't. I never told her it wasn't the teacher lying there, or touching a dead hand, or even the fear of dying itself that made me pull away, that scared me. It was a young boy's realization that she would die, that one day I'd need to touch her hand too. Years later, I observed her pass in review. It was a small affair compared to her friends, but I watched person after person make the long walk to her body, knowing my walk would be at the end, reserved for close family. It was maybe 15 feet from the pew where I sat to her, but it might as well have been 1,500. And the swell, that thickening was there, pushing against me like an undertow in the wrong direction while another pulled, toward and away from the inevitable, toward and away from goodbye, toward and away from touching her hand. I forced myself to walk to her. I forced myself to hold her hand, cold, thin, rigid. In that way, the only way I can think of, she was unremarkable. It's okay, heaven, soul, body, there's nothing to be afraid of. I can still hear her saying it. I make the long drive to Vidor, Texas tomorrow, from where I'm sitting right now. 1,717 miles and another long walk, the exact same 15 feet, to fold my grandfather's flag, to force myself, my 42-year-old, 5-year-old self, to hold his hand, to pass in review again.
Hasn't he got a wonderful style?
Quite languid, isn't it? But engaging at the same time.
Yeah. Language's quite good.
Very listenable to.
Yeah, he doesn't do too much, does he?
No.
I was going to say he's a very sort of invisible writer, but I mean that in the best possible way. Like he doesn't get in the way of himself, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You're unaware of his craft in a way. That's an incredibly hard thing to do. But yeah, he just kind of describes something and places you
very cleanly.
Yeah, places you in a moment, and it's very kind of unself-conscious. But yeah, so it is quite a talent.
Which probably takes an awful lot of work.
Well, that's exactly, yeah. It looks really easy, doesn't it? It's a bit like those writers who do very well, you know, Stephen King and people like that, you think, well, they're not really doing much, are they? Oh my God, they are. But yeah, really, really quite a good writer, I think. He gets you to feel, I think, without really talking about feelings, without pulling any tricks.
It's because he drops you so clearly into the situation. It's very easy to empathise and sympathise with everything that's going on because you feel like you've got a first-person view of it.
I love that line, the sun-cast towers of light, pillars westward across the pews and people. One rested squarely on the open casket. My grandmother held my hand as the organ played, and we walked in shuffling line with others to view the body. It's just like you're there. You're like a kid.
It's very clever with the light thing, though, isn't it? Because that's like a film shot.
This is so visual, isn't it?
Taking you from outside to inside to then focusing on the casket.
Very clever. And that line about tall people crying, getting stepped on once, the smell of perfume. That's another little moment, isn't it? You're just a kid in that moment, not really knowing what's going on.
Yeah.
Just experiencing all this like stimulus around you.
Yeah.
Very clever. And the other bit that I underlined.
We make a spelling mistake. We get on to correcting stuff now. So that was the good bits, Aaron. Right. Here's the bad bits. Here's what we thought.
No, I love this bit as well. I forced myself to trudge through a thickening. I forced myself to look up and into the casket, to look at the imitation lying there. What? That is so good.
The word imitation, when I listened to it, hit me like a ton of bricks. It was like, whoa, yeah.
Yeah. And it's not the word you would ever think of. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's a brilliant choice of word, to be fair. Yeah. Really, really is.
And then that whole repetition when his grandma dies, but it's very beautiful. But that idea that there's a kind of gravitational pull and push around a dead body.
Yeah.
You know, there's a sort of intrigue, but there's also a real difficulty in facing the death of someone you love. And what a brilliant way of expressing that. I thought it was wonderful.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Aaron.
Yeah, I really like this stuff. of Aaron's I've read. I'm looking forward to reading his first novel, which will hopefully be fledging fairly soon. I think he's kind of in the process of just, it sounds like kind of finishing it off. He's not quite sure how to release it at the moment. So if any indie presses are listening to this and you like the cut of his jib,
I think, he's got a nice way with words. Maybe we should have a look at that.
But yeah, I think Aaron Courts, I think he's a bit of a star in waiting, I think.
Yeah.
He's very talented. So I'll put his details in the show notes just in case. You never know. Those agents may be calling.
Yeah, and there's other stuff of his to read in there as well, isn't there? So check it out.
Check it out. His Substack's in there, yeah. Well, there we go. Let's round up there.
Yeah.
Mention Scrivener one more time.
Scrivener. There we go. Anything else you need mentioning?
I think that's pretty much it. And mate, just to encourage you, if this is before Friday the 24th of October, midday.
Yeah, there is still time. There's still time. Come on.
Do it. Just have a go now. Just start writing now. You never know. You could just start writing and see where it goes, and you could win that money.
I would imagine as well, the point in the day, in the week, when people are most inspired to write something brilliant will be just after our podcast is finished, after listening to it.
It's the perfect time.
Because we must be we're like, just like
we've inspired
what's better than a
you.
muse? It's like a step up from a muse, isn't it? That's what we are. So you probably,
So go do that now.
Very fertile now in terms of flash fiction, guys. So if you haven't, now's the time.
Primed and ready.
Yeah.
Right.
I feel like we should do like an alternative ending. Do you remember when we did the Agodic fiction and you could do the Choose Your Own Adventure books?
That's good.
Because we're going to go to the awards,
Yeah.
so we should do it. Yay! Well, by the time you hear this, we have been very, very successful at the awards. So thank you to everyone for listening. It's lovely to be involved.
Check out all the photos online of us winning the award and celebrating afterwards.
Or turn to page 23. Obviously, it's good to be nominated, but at the end of the day, awards don't mean that much, really.
Yeah,
it's just,
they're all
luck of the draw on the night, and we're just pleased to have been involved.
And
really.
it was good fun, wasn't it?
No big deal.
Yeah.
No big deal. And we'd have been the same if we'd have won. We wouldn't have made a big fuss. It's just, it's not what it's about to us. It's about you guys. That's what it really is. It's about us just being there for you and helping you. So, awards. Awards. It's not very easy to do the old
the
rhyming thing there. But anyway. But thank you for listening, regardless of our award status.
Yeah.
Hopefully it doesn't matter to you either. And we look forward to speaking to you next time.
And don't forget to subscribe and possibly even say something nice about us online.
Yeah, there's been a few people saying nice things online about us. It is lovely.
Have.
And it just helps spread the word a bit. There's a couple of new listeners we picked up that have like, oh, God, I've just started listening. It's brilliant. So,
tell a friend.
Do spread the word.
Right. Take care, folks. And we'll see you next time.
Ta-ra for now.
Hello?
Where's everybody gone?